Thanks for tuning in with us this evening for the Grow Your Own Fruits and Veggies webinar. My name is Jessie Stahl, and I'm the Senior Program and Policy Coordinator here at PlantPure Communities. And I'm joining in tonight from Wilmington, North Carolina. I heard one other person out there who's joining in from the same city as me, so that's pretty cool. And so before we get started, if you would like to support the various programs and activities, including the free webinars that PPC provides, you can donate on the PlantPure Communities website at www.plantpurecommunities.org.
Great, thank you, Jessie. And for some reason, your slides aren't showing, so I just stopped the sharing, but if you want to go ahead and cue those up again. Yeah, we're seeing your email. Yeah, good. Thanks. So let's go. Welcome, everybody. It's a pleasure to have you all here tonight. Some of you might be new to PlantPure Communities. Some of you have been connected to us for quite a few years. Some are pod members. Some are group leaders. Some are folks that might just be interested in gardening specifically and may learn a little more about plant-based eating along the way. Welcome to all of you. My name is Caroline Dyer, and I'm the Vice President of PlantPure Communities. I'm joined by two of our team members tonight, Jessie Stahl, who you've already met, and Ella Stevens, who will introduce herself in a moment. We're also joined by our presenters, Laura and Steve Bartholomew, from the Square Foot Gardening Foundation, who will introduce themselves later. We're delighted to have partnered on this webinar with the Square Foot Gardening Foundation. It's a great connection with PPC and for folks who are trying or are already making changes to a healthier lifestyle. We know that people who grow their own food are more likely to eat it, more fruits and vegetables. So PlantPure Communities, just a little bit about the nonprofit to get started, is a 501c3 nonprofit organization founded by Nelson Campbell, who directed the film PlantPure Nation in 2015. It was released. And PPC works to build stronger, healthier, and more sustainable neighborhoods. In order to do that, our goal is to share the evidence-based science of Dr. T. Colin Campbell to help educate people about how optimal health may be achieved through a whole food plant-based diet. We are not about being the food police. Rather, we want to share the information so that people can make informed decisions about their health and really start to feel empowered. Many of us have been victimized by the food and dairy industries and even pharmaceutical industries. And PlantPure Communities is all about helping people to understand that there are ways they can take control and understand how powerful nutrition is. Briefly, I want to tell you also about the Pod Network. We work with many amazing community groups called pods across the United States and abroad. The number of people engaged with the pods is always growing, which is really exciting to see. We now have over 200,000 people participating in the mini pods. Anybody and everybody is welcome to be a part of the pod network. You can find out if there's a pod in your community by visiting our website, plantpurecommunities.org. And we welcome you to join or start a pod today to help build this grassroots movement. We also have toolkits on our website. While you're there, you can check them out, which were created in an effort to support pods to do whatever they want to do, which is meaningful to their community, whether it's organizing a Veg Fest event, helping to make a difference in the restaurant options that are provided, transitioning as a group or as individuals to a whole food plant-based diet and helping support each other in that, planting a community garden, and more. Now I'll hand things off to Ella so we can focus on tonight's topic.
Thanks, Caroline. Hi, everyone. I'm Ella Stevens, and I'm the Pod Support Programs Manager at PlantPure Communities. I worked closely with the Square Foot Gardening Foundation in 2018 and now again in 2019 to encourage more pods and pod members to grow their own food and to help others eat more plant-based. We are very grateful for their support and for Jim Courage, who is on the PPC Board of Directors, for creating this partnership. It has been a lovely experience working with Laura, Steve, and the Square Foot Gardening Foundation as we explore the synergy between our organizations. We are excited to watch collaboration continue to grow and impact people's and communities' lives. And now we are excited to announce that we have added to the gardening toolkit on PPC's website. There is a new info sheet which contains step-by-step information to guide the creation of your square foot garden. And you can see the info sheet on the slide there. And there is also a new PowerPoint presentation under the multimedia tools section, which is intended for group leaders to use to teach their pod members about the square foot gardening method. So you can check them out under the toolkit section on plantpurecommunities.org. And just quickly, as an important note regarding the webinar and the materials in the toolkit, what is provided here is a general overview about the square foot gardening method to get you started. We welcome you to post your questions along the way in Zoom or on Facebook for the Q&A session, which will be at the end of the webinar. For all of the details, we do suggest getting a copy of the all-new Square Foot Gardening book, and the 3rd edition is now out. You can order it on Amazon, and we will link to that later, and it's linked in the toolkit. You will see and hear more about the book later, but for now, I will pass it over to Laura and Steve Bartholomew, our presenters from the Square Foot Gardening Foundation.
Thanks, Ella. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Square Foot Gardening PPC webinar. Thank you for joining us.
Hold on, we're gonna make sure we're getting on here. All right, I think we're there. We go.
Great. Yes, we can see it.
My name is Steve Bartholomew. I'm here with my wife, Laura. We are the directors of the Square Foot Gardening Foundation. My dad, Mel, is the inventor of the Square Foot Gardening system. He created it, the concept of it, of course, back in 1975 to solve the problems of wastefulness of single-row gardening. Today, we want to share our story with you. After his retirement as an engineer, did we move that slide over there?
Hold on, let's see.
Nope, everything still looks great.
All right. After his retirement as an engineer and efficiency expert, Mel took up gardening as a hobby. He joined his local community garden and saw how gardeners came out with great enthusiasm in the spring, but by mid-July, the gardens were overgrown with weeds. They were dried out, and produce lay wasted all over the ground. So Mel set out to find a better way. He thought gardening should be fun and not a lot of hard work. Mel devised an experimental garden on his home on Long Island and refined the method by trial and error. His experimentation changed the way he thought about growing food by using less space, less soil, and water, and that meant fewer tools. He kept condensing his garden smaller and smaller, and you could see him here back in the early 80s in one of his test gardens, and he moved condensing his garden from 2-foot squares down to 1-foot squares, and that's when the filming of the TV show started to begin. As time went on, Mel's experimentation showed some unique results that became the basis of today's method. He created a formula for spacing to extract the highest yields from the least amount of space. He figured out how to prevent weeds by using barriers at the base of the beds, and he created a soil mixture he called MEL'S Mix to retain water, which is completely organic with the help of composting. Mel's first book, Square Foot Gardening, was published in 1981 and went on to become the best-selling gardening book of all time. The original book spawned the popular PBS television series in 1993, which I produced with my dad for a number of years. After the television series, Mel authored more Square Foot Gardening books that you could see across the top of that slide there. And that's him at his old Chevy pickup truck. At the end of every PBS show, we would answer questions, and of course, he would promote his book.
So hi, everybody. My name is Laura Bartholomew. Welcome. We're so happy to have everybody here from all over the world, actually, from what Ella was saying before. So what is the Square Foot Gardening method? Square Foot Gardening is such an easy gardening method that utilizes space efficiently without the waste and work of a typical single-row garden. By utilizing MEL'S Mix, the grid, and efficient plant spacing, this method is really easy for beginners. No prior gardening experience is necessary, but there's some important things to remember about the method. It's space saving, there's no waste. You utilize MEL'S special growing soil, use a grid for plant spacing. We use weed barriers for easy maintenance, and it's super easy for beginners. So this slide, we are going to go over the 10 basics of square foot gardening. Each of these basics will be explained in a little more detail as we proceed with the webinar. But let's just go over the 10 basics. The first one is layout. Arrange in squares, not rows. So we're going to be thinking in squares now instead of rows. Number 2, boxes. Build boxes to hold the soil that we call MEL'S mix, and you only need 6 inches of it to grow most plants. Aisles. Space the boxes around 3 feet apart to form walking aisles. Soil. Fill boxes with MEL'S mix, which is 1/3 compost, 1/3 peat moss, 1/3 coarse vermiculite. No worries about where your soil is coming from because you're not using your existing soil. No worrying about contaminants in old soil. You're not going to be using it. You'll use MEL'S mix and it'll work for you. A grid. Make a square foot grid for the top of each box to organize for planting. Number 6, care. Never walk on the growing soil. That's why we have those aisles that we talked about. You tend the garden from the aisles, pulling a few weeds if you have any at all with just your fingers. Number 7, select. Plant different herbs or vegetables using what we call the 1, 4, 9 or 16 plants per square foot spacing rule. Number 8, plant. Plant only 2 or 3 seeds per hole. So you don't waste seeds. You don't need a whole bunch of seeds. Just plant 2 or 3 seeds in each hole. Water. We like to hand water from a bucket of sun-warmed water. Some people like to use a drip system. That's okay too. Number 10 is harvest. After harvesting a square foot, add compost to replenish the nutrients, and then you replace it with a different crop. So let's talk about the magic of MEL'S mix. We mentioned this a couple of times, and it's really important to square foot gardening. And Mel created this soil mixture based on his years of experimentation. So again, it's 1/3 peat moss, 1/3 coarse vermiculite, 1/3 blended compost. You can get this stuff in most garden centers or home improvement stores, carry it sometimes. When the soil mix is used, the results are really amazing. And again, we only use about 6 inches of the soil. So it's organic, and there's no fertilizer necessary. It's completely organic. And by using compost, it actually replenishes the nutrients. It's friable, meaning it's so soft that weeds, which are few, can be easily removed. No heavy tools are necessary to get the weeds out. It increases the water retention because it uses vermiculite, which is completely organic, and it retains moisture in the mix. It reduces waste by not overwatering because it acts like a sponge and it only soaks in the water that it needs. Grow most vegetables in 6 inches. The roots actually will spread out, not down. Last year I grew tomatoes in 6 inches of MEL'S mix. They were 9 feet high, and I can't tell you how many tomatoes I got from it. So the other unique thing about square foot gardening, and this is really important, I think, in many ways, is the grid. So the grid not only defines a square foot garden, but it's really important for plant spacing, thereby reducing waste. So you don't overplant. It's also a great visual guide for crop rotation, and it allows you to stagger your harvest, which aids in weed and pest control as well. So it's really important to utilize the grid and see the garden as individual mini gardens, and that's what makes it a square foot garden. So it's really easy for beginners, and in this visual you can see kids love to garden, and children especially, they love to get involved. This particular slide you'll see on the left where they painted the outside of the box. That's really fun to do for the kids. Just make sure you paint the outside only, not the inside, because you don't want anything leaching into your soil. That particular photo, you'll see the box is like 12 inches high. Unnecessary. You really don't need it. It actually is wasteful as far as soil is concerned. But get the kids involved. It's a great way to get them started on their plant-based journey. So this slide will talk about the advantages of the method. And here's a few reasons why it's so successful. It saves space. It saves on water usage. It strengthens communities by bringing people together. It encourages children and families to garden for nutritious food. And kids actually find out where their food comes from, which is fun. It emphasizes the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, recycle. That's big in square foot gardening. It positively impacts climate change and sustainability, promotes healthy plant-based animal-friendly lifestyle. It's perfect for community groups. Restaurants use it, organizations, hospitals, veterans groups, volunteer groups, senior citizen centers. The list goes on and on. So this is actually a photo from our new book that Ella had mentioned, All New Square Foot Gardening, the 3rd edition. This shows a typical harvest in a growing season from 1 4-foot by 4-foot bed. Of course, this can vary depending on what you plant and where you are. But look at all that delicious produce out of 1 4-foot by 4-foot bed and 6 inches of soil. Get the kids involved. They love getting their hands dirty and nurturing plants. I don't know if you guys remember the little cups that you would bring home with the sunflower seed. We all loved that in kindergarten. Square foot gardening can teach them so much about where their food comes from. It can teach them about the environment, math, science, and being part of the community. We have some great projects with kids getting involved with square foot gardening. In summer camps, Boy and Girl Scouts, schools, even working with seniors. Steve's dad, Mel, always said gardening should be fun and not a lot of work. So we talked about the 3 R's, reduce, reuse, and recycle in a previous slide. Let's just talk about this a little bit. Square foot gardening is a method that reduces the need for lots of seeds and space. So there's no waste like typical row gardening. Food waste is a huge problem. By square foot gardening, you reduce food waste by growing only what you need. Too many people grow too much and the harvest winds up on the ground rotting, or you can't give it away fast enough. Square foot gardening also reduces the reliance on fertilizers by using natural, nutrient-rich compost that you can make yourself. Square foot gardening reduces water waste by using MEL'S mix, which retains water and encourages hand watering over broadcasting, like with a sprinkler. That's a no-no, over the entire garden. That's really wasteful. So we don't use a sprinkler, we water from underneath. So let's talk about reuse. Mel was big on reusing. Reuse materials for building your boxes. You can find scrap lumber by asking your local lumber yard. Just make sure it's not treated wood. They may even cut the wood into 4-foot lengths if you ask them. They did that for me at Home Depot. They just cut it right in half for me and I got my 4-foot pieces of lumber. Some people like to use bricks or old patio stones or cut up wood pallets to define their box. And for the grids, they use old Venetian blinds. That's great for grids, or maybe even bamboo stakes. So reuse your squares too throughout the growing season. After you harvest one square, replenish that square with compost, and then you plant a new crop. So pull lettuce, for example, after it goes to seed or it gets too mature. Put it in your compost pile as long as it's not diseased, and then you replant that same square with maybe some radishes. So think about also regrowing some of your food from scraps. I know Jody liked this one. Celery, potatoes, lettuce, perfect for regrowing. So experiment with that and have some fun. And the last R is recycle. Leftover veggie scraps can be used to help eliminate food waste. Instead of throwing them out, use them in soup stocks, freeze them, or better yet, put them in the compost pile. Recycle cardboard, egg cartons, and toilet paper tubes for seed starters. The used solo cups, you know, when you have those parties, we all have used those on occasion, which we don't like to, but they're perfect for hand watering your garden. So there's lots of great ways to recycle when it comes to square foot gardening. So another great thing about this method is it eliminates waste. So row gardening can be so wasteful. What happens to all those zucchini that get too big, or rotten tomatoes that are laying on the ground? Typical row gardening can be too much work and a waste of precious space, water, and produce. The worst part of row gardening is retilling each spring and pulling weeds all summer long. So who doesn't love the smell of a fresh strawberry picked right from your own garden? I know when I go to the supermarket and I buy them in these plastic containers, they're tasteless and they have no scent. We all love a fresh strawberry picked right from the garden, or a big juicy tomato still warm from the sun. You'll be eating healthy and looking forward to your next nutritious plant-based meal ripening right in your own square foot garden right outside your door. So square foot gardening is great for community involvement, and there's so many ways to share a square foot garden in your own town. A great place to start with is right in your own community garden, or perhaps your house of worship, your library, your school, senior centers. That's a great way to get people involved. Make sure you have permission, and don't forget you need a water source and plenty of sun. So let's talk about the 8 steps on how to actually get started with building a square foot garden. Some of you may have already purchased our new book, this all new Square Foot Gardening 3rd edition. If you have a book handy, you could just turn to page 35 in the book and follow along with the steps. And here's an overview of the 8 steps to help you get started. So we'll go into more detail about each step in the next slides. So let's just go over the 8 steps real quickly. Number 1, planning your garden. That's super important, is to get a plan in place. Number 2, laying out your square foot garden, and you'll have to see where your sun is in order to lay out and find the best spot for your garden. Number 3, building boxes and grids. We'll show you a quick overview on how to do that. Number 4, building box accessories like trellises. Number 5, creating the MEL'S mix. Number 6, planting. 7, maintaining, which is very little. And number 8 is the fun part, harvesting. So
now for step 1, planning your square foot garden. If you're new to gardening, we urge you to start small with either a 4 foot by 4 foot bed or even a 3 foot by 3 foot bed. Think of the veggies you love to eat most and work from there. We have convenient charts in the book to help you plan for specific types of gardens, such as a salsa garden or a salad garden. It's an area where you can be creative as much as you want. How about laying out a square foot garden? Well, we suggest a simple 4 foot by 4 foot square, but sometimes space or sunlight determine the shape of your square foot garden. For example, if the only sunny place in your yard is along a fence, then do a 2 foot by 8 foot or a 2 foot by 20 foot bed. It's okay as long as you can reach into it and still have 12-inch square grids. You can even use the fence as a trellis and grow up. Remember a few things: location, location, location. Choose an area that gets 6 to 8 hours of sun per day. If possible, place your garden next to the house for convenience. If you have shade, you can still grow, but you'll have a limited selection of crops to choose from. Stay clear of trees and shrubs where roots may interfere, and always be wary of puddles after a heavy rain. You don't want stagnant water. No need to worry about existing soil when you make MEL'S mix. Step 3, building your box. It's really pretty simple when you think about it. The only tools you'll need are 4 4-foot lengths of board, either 2-inch by 6-inch wide preferred, or 1-inch by 6-inch will do. It's easy to ask any home improvement center that already sells wood in 8-foot lengths just to cut 2 of them in half. A sturdy weed cloth, which can be found at any home improvement store or garden center. This is great because it allows for drainage as well as a weed barrier. Nothing's going to be growing up. We like to use decking screws. In this case, you'll need 12 of them, and a power drill. A staple gun is optional if you want to staple the weed cloth to the box, but it's not necessary. And of course, very important, the grids. They can be built by using 6 strips of 4-foot length lath, which we suggest, or use old Venetian blinds or even bamboo sticks. That they can be used as well. Or you can buy the grids through our approved vendor, Square Foot Gardening for the Red River Valley. You'll find their link on our website. Now, here's a little video that we want to play. It's not hard to build a square foot garden planter box, and we're going to show you the basics right here to make a simple 4x4 garden. We have our 2-inch by 6-inch, 8-foot long wood boards already pre-cut in half, and we're going to pre-drill holes on the ends. That way, when we put our screws in, they're not going to split the edges of the wood. And we're going to lay out our 4x4 frame, alternating the corners. And to put it together, we're going to use those 3-inch deck screws we talked about earlier. After you secure them, everything comes together nicely. We then add our weed cloth, available at home improvement stores and nursery centers. I like stapling it to the edges myself. When you're done, you flip over your 4x4 and you're ready to add MEL'S mix. Hey, but first, let's make a grid. I'm using 1/2-inch plastic lath that I buy at Home Depot or Lowe's, cut into 4-foot lengths. With a measuring tape and a pencil, I lay out the 6 pieces and I make sure that I'm using 1-foot spacing. Using self-tapping screws, everything comes together nicely, and you can see how it also folds up for winter storage. After you add your MEL'S mix to your garden, pop on your grid and you're ready to start planting. And it really can be that simple.
So step 4, now that we have our box built, thank you, Steve, that was great. We'll talk about box accessories. So if you look on the bottom right, we're going to be talking about that one first. Mel believed that many crops should be grown up, not out. Crops like melons, tomatoes, cucumbers, pole beans, squash, and even pumpkins can grow vertically with a strong trellis frame. I know lots of people have grown pumpkins up, believe it or not. So we suggest using 2 simple rebars found in home centers, pounded into the ground on either edge of the box, on the outside edge of the box, and then metal conduit piping with strong nylon netting. So you can see how the girl is tying the netting right to the conduit piping. Always trellis your square-foot garden on the north side of your box so it won't shade other plants. Vertical gardening is explained in depth in the book. It would take too much time in this webinar right now to go over all the options with vertical gardening, but the illustration, as you can see, it shows you a beautiful arched trellis, and that's an illustration from the new book. A lot of people grow beans of those trellises. Now, here's another, I'm sure you guys have questions about, well, what about carrots and stuff in 6 inches of soil? Well, we use what we call a top hat. It's simply a 12-inch by 12-inch wood frame that can be added to the top of a square on your square-foot garden. Build up, not down. So you got to think up. This is a great way to add depth to 1 square or more for growing long root vegetables such as carrots, leeks, and potatoes. You could make an entire square-foot garden 12 inches, as I had mentioned before, if you wanted to, but why waste all that soil and money? Remember, 6 inches is all you need for most plants. So step 5 is creating the MEL'S mix. And we cannot stress enough the importance of making MEL'S mix, which will last for about 10 years with adding compost. It's the perfect growing medium for your square-foot garden. Compost is the key ingredient in MEL'S mix, and the best compost is the kind of compost that you make yourself. Mel even suggested, and he used to do this, he actually did this, he would go to the grocery store or farmer's market and ask for produce that was being thrown away, and he would take it back home and he would throw it in his compost pile. So you can go to the produce section and do that, make sure it's organic, and make your own MEL'S mix. Provides the perfect organic nutritional support for nearly all your plants. Best of all, it eliminates the digging, it's huge. No worries about contaminants in the existing soil.
Now, initially, you might find measuring the quantities of the 3 ingredients for MEL'S mix a bit confusing because the products are sold according to different standards of measurements. Sometimes they're sold in pounds, or in cubic feet, or sometimes in quarts. But don't worry about all that. The only measurement in MEL'S mix that matters is volume. And a typical 4-foot by 4-foot by 6-inch square-foot garden has a total volume of 8 cubic feet. Now that we know that the volume of a 4x4 is 8 cubic feet, the easiest thing to do is to use a standard 5-gallon bucket sold in home improvement stores as your measuring cup. You will need 4 5-gallon buckets each of peat moss, vermiculite, and compost. When buying bagged compost, just make sure it's organic. and you'll need to blend 5 different kinds if possible. If you are creating a different size box, you can find our volume calculator on our website, or you can contact us and we'll help you with the totals. So let's review the materials you'll need to make MEL'S mix. A large tarp, a particle mask for dust, a shovel and a rake, a 5-gallon bucket, compost, and remember, if it's store-bought, we like to use about 5 different kinds if possible, coarse vermiculite, peat moss, a wheelbarrow, that's in case you don't want to use a tarp, and a water supply. Now, when you're making MEL'S mix, and this step helps, it's best to have a helper. We suggest using a face mask to reduce dust particles and you can also lightly mist with water during each step. Lay out your tarp or keep your wheelbarrow close to your square-foot garden on a flat surface. Have a hose with a spray nozzle ready. Start with a measured compost in the center of the tarp and lift the corners of the tarp or to lift it and drag it, folding it over on itself. This is an easy way to mix compost and everything else you're going to put in. Once the compost is mixed, add your peat moss. Mix it slightly and then mist it with some water as well. Next, add coarse vermiculite and mix that well the same way. You transfer this whole MEL'S mix to your garden box, you spread it evenly, and you add your grid. Now, you may say to yourself, there's a few things that you could change up if you'd like, and a couple of them, we've had a lot of requests for people saying, well, peat moss, it's really not a renewable resource. What else do we use? Well, one of the things is called coconut coir, and it's an acceptable organic alternative to peat moss. We do recommend peat moss as the best ingredient for MEL'S mix, but you can use coconut coir as a mix. Perlite is another natural material used for the same purpose as vermiculite. We don't like perlite as much for a few reasons. It floats to the top of the soil mix as you water, and because it's white, it looks unnatural and unsightly. It doesn't hold water as well as vermiculite as well. And you may want to research some of the pros and cons before you decide yourself.
Well, let's look at step 6, planting. That's the fun part. Think of your plants in terms of shirt sizes: small, medium, large, and extra large. Through much trial and error, Mel found just the right spacing for each mature plant. Square-foot gardening uses what we call the 1-4-9-16 spacing rule. So this is the fun part, the planting. Some people prefer to grow from seed. Others like to use plant starts, and those are the little cell packs that you get at the nursery of grown plants already. So if you want to find the best outcomes of each, I would say consult our book, and that'll give you the best outcomes of each choice. If you decide to start from seed, remember you only need a few seeds so they don't go to waste, and you can store seeds for a year or two at least. If you store them properly, they'll last you from season to season. Here's an overview of the 1-4-9-16 spacing method, and you can see on this chart. 1 per square for extra large crops such as broccoli, cabbage, and peppers. And don't let those peppers fool you, they get pretty big. 4 per square for large crops such as leaf lettuce, Swiss chard, or even flowers like marigolds, which we like to put into our square-foot garden. They're natural pest deterrents. 9 per square for medium crops such as bush beans, spinach, or beets. 16 per square for small crops such as carrots, radishes, or onions. You may want to plant adjoining squares with different crops to prevent overplanting. This way you can see exactly what you're planting, because I know people they're all excited about it, but you don't want to overplant. And you want to do companion planting too, which we'll talk about at some other webinar, hopefully, to help with pest control. And it also helps with your growing soil, and it looks pretty when you mix them up too. So don't plant all of one kind in adjoining squares, because if you have any kind of pest, it's going to just eat them all at once. And pests don't like to work hard. So if you separate them, you can save them. So let's go to the next slide, which is step 7, maintaining your square foot garden. So maintaining your square foot garden is really easy. A trowel, a pencil, a pair of scissors, and a small pruner are the only tools you really need to maintain your garden. The trowel is for transplanting and mixing compost each time a square is ready to be replanted. All you need a trowel to do is, in the springtime, each spring, you need a trowel just to loosen up your entire 4x4 bed each spring to get it ready for planting. So there's no more tilling. You just do it by hand with a trowel. It's great. It really eliminates a lot of work. A pencil is used to poke holes in the MEL'S mix for planting and lifting out young seedlings for transplanting. A pair of scissors is for harvesting beet, lettuce, and kale leaves for salads. So Mel always believed in cutting a little of this and a little of that every day to make a salad instead of pulling out the whole head of lettuce. You just snip the leaves with the scissors. You use the scissors for cutting dead blossoms and snipping out extra seedlings that you don't want. And a small pruner is used for harvesting produce that has thicker stems, produce such as cucumbers, peppers, eggplants, melons. You don't want to twist them and pull them off the vine because you can rip the vine. So you want to use those pruners and prune them. So no more lugging those heavy buckets of water up and down rows or dragging hoses to broadcast water. It's so wasteful. Just keep that 5-gallon bucket that you used as a measuring cup for the MEL'S mix and use it for sun-warmed water or even rainwater. You can catch rainwater near your square foot garden. Water by hand, and that's really, if you're doing a small garden, it's great. Water by hand to keep diseases at bay. And it encourages you to get up really close to your plants to see if any problems arise. So you can nip that in the bud, no pun intended. Step 8, harvesting. I love this part because I like to cook. So square foot gardening is fun and rewarding. No more backbreaking work, digging up soil, harvesting rows, no more waste. Some crops can actually be harvested earlier because they can be planted a bit earlier. The 6 inches of MEL'S mix warms up really quickly in the spring, so it gives you a little jump on it. We suggest also that you stagger your planting so that the harvest doesn't all come at once. So like tomatoes, you want to plant a tomato 1 week and then maybe a week or 2 later plant another tomato plant. And this way they don't all harvest at the same time. Also, when you plant a new square after removing a finished crop. So that's one of the things that we do there with square foot gardening. Each little grid is its own garden. You have to look at it in terms of that. We encourage you to learn more about cool weather and warm weather crops, so that way you can extend your harvest. You can even grow lettuce in the winter outdoors with square foot gardening. And we've had a guy in Utah who actually grew lettuce and there was virtually snow on the ground. So that's the 8 steps to your square foot garden.
Now let's step outside the box a little bit, talk about community and what it means. Mel championed the potential of square foot gardening to be the most efficient way to home garden. He also believed it could transform lives. He knew square foot gardening could solve many problems, such as health problems associated with hunger or poor nutrition, helping to eliminate food waste. It helps with climate change, lessens our carbon footprint by reducing waste. And the bonus is we eat more vegetables instead of meat. We believe square foot gardening can bring people together, not just through community gardening, but by square foot gardens in houses of worship, libraries, schools, senior centers, and working with our veterans. Square foot gardening is more than an innovative technique for home gardeners. It has changed communities around the world by beautifying neighborhoods, showing inner city residents a solution to fresh produce, healthful produce. Square foot gardening enables the elderly and those with disabilities to garden using elevated square foot gardening beds. And we actually have some of those on one of our approved vendor sites, Red River Valley, and these things are wonderful. They're being used now by wheelchair veterans and with the proceeds donated to Semper Fi.
So if you'd like to become a certified instructor for square foot gardening, or you like to contact a CI near you, or maybe you just want to learn more, please visit www.squarefootgardening.org. or you can contact us directly at info@squarefootgardening.org. We will be announcing new courses for certified instructors and dates when they become available. So please keep in touch and sign up for our newsletter to find out more. And follow the official Square Foot Gardening Foundation Facebook page. Just make sure it says Square Foot Gardening Foundation, because there are other pages out there that are not us. So that would be the Square Foot Gardening Foundation Facebook page and Instagram. And consider joining the forum where you can get expert advice. And we'll be here to help you get started.
Now, to find out more in-depth information about how to get started with your own square foot garden, please check out our new book, the all-new Square Foot Gardening 3rd edition, as well as our other Square Foot Gardening books. You can find them under Shop Our Books on our website, on Amazon, and also on your local bookstore.
So this is actually, last year we did a Get Growing contest with PPC, our first time with you guys. And these are examples, these photos here are examples of some of the pod members that started their own Square Foot Gardens last year. And wow, look at those, they're great. They're really awesome. So if you guys decide that you want to hopefully start a Square Foot garden, which we hope you do, send us your photos and we'll put them on our social media, on our Facebook site, and Ella will also put them up on social media, and we'll share with everybody the stuff you're doing.
So we want to thank Square Foot Gardening Foundation. We'd like to thank Jody Cass and Jim Courage and Ella Stevenson and Carolyn Dyer and everyone in the PPC family for participating in this webinar. We look forward to seeing some photos of your Square Foot gardens this summer. Thank you and happy gardening.
Happy gardening.
Thanks, Laura and Steve. That was great. We've already got many comments with positive feedback about your presentation.
Oh, good.
And so now, now we will move into the Q&A portion of the webinar. And so we'll have to try to be kind of quick to get through these questions that we have. But so for the first question, many people asked about pest control, covering plants, and protecting your garden from animals. So Laura, you mentioned the marigold flowers, but what are some of the other best ways to protect your garden?
Oh, that's a broad question. Well, prevention. That's always a good way to go. So a lot of times people use floating covers, they call them. It's a cloth that you can put down to prevent eggs from laying in the first place. The other thing that is really important to Square Foot gardening and pest control is the MEL'S mix. It's clean, so you're not digging up pests and eggs from your existing soil. So that's another reason why the MEL'S mix is really important. Also, putting your garden close to the house and hand watering so you can be on top of pests and you can actually see them. And Mel always believed that you start small. In other words, you don't want to hit a fly with a sledgehammer, right? So you actually hand pick many of the pests off or cut the leaves that are infected and put them in a garbage receptacle. Don't put them in your compost pile. As far as critters, a lot of times we urge you to build a wire cage to protect against critters. I have a problem with squirrels all the time, and in the early spring I put chicken wire on top of my garlic before it actually sprouts, and it helps. Other things that you can do is use natural, and we are totally natural. People use garlic and cayenne pepper sprays, things like that. The most aggressive thing I would suggest to use would be a neem oil, which is organic. A lot of people use the neem oil with success. So each plant and each bug really requires a different approach, but I would say prevention is the best approach. I hope that answered that question.
Yep. And just on a quick follow-up on that, so we had Pearl asked, if you are adding a store-bought plant that comes in a pot to your Square Foot garden, is it important to remove all of the soil off the plant so it doesn't contaminate your MEL'S mix?
No, I wouldn't worry too much about contamination. You want to keep those roots intact so they have a good start. I wouldn't take too much of the soil, but a lot of the soil that nurseries use, the potting soils and the mixes, are very similar to MEL'S mix. So you'll see that they'll use the vermiculite and the peat moss in their plant starts. So it's very compatible. Just, I would suggest when you buy those plants, look underneath the leaves for any insects that little eggs or little flies or anything like that, you don't want to bring that into your garden. But I think you're okay with leaving the roots intact.
Great. We had a question. You mentioned some of the ways that square foot gardening can bring people together to change communities. Tell us a bit more about how square foot gardening method has been implemented in low-income communities and how it has been used globally.
We're working with a few programs right now in New Jersey. Specifically, one of our CIs, Bob Markey, is doing a fantastic job with bringing the square foot gardening system to the local YMCAs. So what we're doing in many of the areas, Laura and I visited some last summer, and we'll be out there this summer again, is they're teaching children where their vegetables are coming from, first of all, and how they're grown. And then the children are learning basic nutrition, and that the plant-based diet is so much better for them than what they may be used to be getting at home a lot. They're taking this information home. We're giving them resources to bring home with them. In one case, I think it was an inner city in East Orange. The children, we did an end of summer camp program. It was called the Great Zucchini Race that Bob Markey runs. And it's a wonderful time, and the children take away so much from that. So square foot gardening can bring together a lot of community involvement. The turnout was tremendous. We're seeing that that's going to be hopefully rolled out throughout the state and hopefully other places as well.
Yeah, and I think, square foot gardening lends itself to the inner city communities so well, because you can literally put your box in a parking lot and grow.
Sure.
There is almost no place you can't grow. As long as you have enough sun and a water source, you can grow virtually anywhere. I hope that answered that one. Oh, Ella, I just wanted to say one thing about pests that I did not say. If we could just go back a second.
Yeah, go ahead.
We urge people too, if they have pest problems, to contact their local Cornell Cooperative Extension and seek out a master gardener as well in your area for any advice or help. So I just wanted to mention that point.
And also go on to our blog. A lot of great information is being shared on our Square Foot Gardening blog, including pests. Get your camera out.
Great.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Laura and Steve. So there were lots of questions about the best type of soil to use. Is there anything else you can say about MEL'S mix and what kind of substitutions you can use when making it?
Well, we talked a little earlier about using substitutions for peat moss. So the coconut coir seems to work pretty well for that. I can't stress enough the importance of MEL'S mix. It's a great way to start. It's pretty much your only first real expense with square foot gardening is getting that done. But once you have that, that'll last at least a good 10 years. And you're always adding compost to it from hopefully your own compost pile. There's some great things that we're doing on our website now and also in the book about composting. And we're going to get into that a lot further in the future this summer. But making your own compost is crucial to square foot gardening. The nutrients in there are incredible. And that's just one of the areas right there.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would not suggest using existing soil. You just don't know what's in it. I mean, for years here on Long Island, there were areas of Long Island where they were using DDT for potato farming. You don't want to be, taking soil from a house that you moved into and you don't know what the prior owner has done there or chemicals that were sprayed on the lawns or what have you. So really the MEL'S mix is key to the success of your square foot garden. I hope that answered that.
Yeah, and there was a follow-up just briefly from Elaine, if there's pre-mixed MEL'S mix available to purchase.
Not yet.
Okay, great.
Coming soon to a neighborhood store, but not yet.
Yeah, we used to have that, but the shipping proved to be difficult and expensive. And because with the foundation right now, we're really focused on spreading the word and humanitarian efforts, it's kind of been put on hold, not to say it won't happen again, But right now it's so easy to make your own.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes people will order vermiculite, which is key to the MEL'S mix with holding water, online. And we definitely can help you with resources if you guys need help finding any of the ingredients.
We did have a lot of people say they were new to gardening when they were registering, or especially square foot gardening in general. And we had a question in the chat tonight from Joshua. If you're completely new to gardening, what are some of the common mistakes that you've seen newbies make? And I guess
everyone starts at one point, and I'm sure we've all been there. I think one of the most common mistakes is people do not measure how much sunlight is needed. Mm-hmm. And so they figure, well, I've got plenty of sunlight, and they put a garden in, but they don't realize that they're getting 4 or 5 hours of sunlight, and that's going to greatly diminish the types of crops you can grow. You're not going to get those big juicy tomatoes with 4 hours of sunlight a day. You need 6 to 8, and that's probably one of the biggest mistakes we've seen. You need good sunlight.
And I'd like to add to that, Joshua. One of the biggest mistakes I think that people make is they start too big. And if you start with a 4 foot by 4 foot bed, using the MEL'S mix, which is another mistake people make, they want to cheap out on that. You're not going to go wrong. Start small, get some experience, and then go from there.
Thank you, Laura.
Mm-hmm.
So we have our final question here. There are many geographic specific questions about where and when to grow certain types of crops. And while we cannot answer all those questions today, are there any general resources for growing crops in different climates that you can recommend?
Yeah, well, my first recommendation, first and foremost, is know what your zone is, your growing zone. And the USDA, the Department of Agriculture, has a hardiness zone map that you can Google on the internet. So I would definitely know your zone first. And hot and dry climates, plants really could use shade cloth. You want to protect them from the sun. They really can burn up. So you might have to water more. Some people use mulch on their beds when you're in a hot climate. Let me see what else we got here. Yeah, you have to water more frequently. The best hot weather plants are tomatoes, eggplants, peppers, squash, melons, corn, beans, things like that. Cool weather plants, if you're in a cooler zone, broccoli, spinach, carrots, leeks, lettuce, cabbage, and those kinds of plants grow well. Peas, radishes. So depending on your zone, depends on your growing season and what you can grow. But check that map. Anything else?
Just this one should be a quick answer. How many people can a 4x4 garden be expected to feed? I realize that answer may vary, but I know you showed the picture in your slides of all the beautiful produce that came from one garden.
Yeah, I believe MEL'S calculation on a 4 foot by 4 foot bed, 6 inches of soil, and figure growing up too with a trellis, you could feed a family of 4 for a growing season, entire growing season. Because don't forget, you're extending your season with the square foot garden. You're starting a little bit earlier because the soil warms up a little earlier, and you're extending it by replacing the squares with different crops. So once a hot weather crop is done, like a tomato, you can replant that square with kale or lettuce, a cool weather crop. So it really extends the harvest.
Yeah, we begin traditionally with spinach and arugula early spring, and we'll actually end with the same crop in the late fall. Takes it right into the freeze temperature.
Yep, so you can get a lot out of a 4 foot by 4 foot. Start small.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you both. So yeah, Jesse, if you can get the slides back up. So thank you, Laura and Steve, for that great presentation.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, it's been lovely. And so quickly, everyone, before we sign off, I want to, tell you just a little bit more about that Get Growing initiative that Laura and Steve mentioned. We're going to do it again this year. So PlantPure Communities and the Square Foot Gardening Foundation are encouraging everyone to get growing this spring. So get involved, create your own square foot garden, take pictures and share them with us via social media or email. Both organizations will be featuring your square foot garden pictures on our Facebook pages to encourage other people to get growing. And so we can post the link for you. There's more information on our website about it, but create a square foot garden, share your picture with us, and yeah, we'll feature you. So we'd love to see what you're doing at home. And then also, if you are a group leader or a member of a pod, we encourage you to check out the Square Foot Garden Foundation's locator map, which lists where there are certified instructors around the world. So get in touch with a local square foot gardening expert and arrange a workshop, presentation, or community gardening opportunity with your pod. And so we will also post this link in the chat, but you see a screenshot of the certified instructor map there on the slide. And with that, I will say thank you to everyone and pass it off to Caroline for some finishing words.
Thank you, Ella. Yes, thanks so much for everyone for joining us tonight. If you're wondering what to do next, of course, the biggest answer is get gardening, get growing. We love to see your gardens, so please do participate in that Get Growing initiative so we can see photos of whatever's happening, whether it's just an empty bed with a grid over it or, you know, plants growing up the trellis. We love to see everything. As I said before, our pod network is so inspiring and awesome, and we're really pleased to have people be a part of it. So anybody and everybody is welcome to join a pod or to start one. Check out our website, plantpurecommunities.org/plantpurepods, if you're looking specifically for information about the pod network on the website. The link is there on the slide right now. We are just so excited to have people be a part of this grassroots movement and building it with us. And then for our final slide, while you're on our website, checking out the great resources that are there and available, we check out the gardening toolkit where the documents are that Ella mentioned earlier tonight. There's like PowerPoint presentation you can use to share with people. There are documents you can print out to use as references. Of course, the book that has been mentioned multiple times now is the detailed go-to resource for all the information that you could want to have. And while you're on our website, consider making a donation to the nonprofit PlantPure Communities to help support the work that we do. And we, of course, invite you all to join us on our Facebook page and to sign up for our newsletter. A huge thank you tonight for Steve and Laura's presentation. It was excellent and really useful for getting people started on the square foot gardening method. And thank you to my coworkers, Ella and Jessie, with whom this webinar would not be possible. And to everyone who joined us tonight and made it something that was worth us doing. So great, thanks so much. And we look forward to the next one.